So when I went back, the Winston-Salem Symphony, the big symphony in town, had gotten a grant to start a research project to put a wind quintet in residence in an elementary school to see if we could affect test scores of young kids by listening to classical music.
Okay.
And because I had been creating that kind of programming, I was hired as the oboist, but also as the person who kind of built the programs.
Okay.
And so I ran a research project. I knew nothing about education and nothing about research, but I did it anyway. And simultaneously, we got hired by a school for physically and mentally disabled children to do a residency. I knew nothing about that. I just went in and figured it out as I went. You know, things were coming left and right to me.
This is going to probably put the brakes on this for a second, but all I want to know is the results of your research.
Okay, yeah, fine.
Yeah.
So in our elementary school, 44% of the kids were passing the state standardized test when we got there. After 3 years, 88% of them passed the state standardized test.
Get out of here.
I'm out of here.
For real?
For real.
What's the sample size?
It was, each grade was like 20 kids, and we had 3 classes in each grade level. So we had, 90 to 100 kids per grade level. So we had about 300 kids that we were working with.
And how long did the program run?
So the program that I was involved with, it was the first 3 years. It continued on for another decade or so, just to work there. But that was our first benchmark.
Right.
We sent in a neurologist from the Bowman Gray School of Medicine after the 3 year because we didn't know exactly what we had done to sort of analyze the kids and us and blah, blah.
Right.
He discovered that what we had done, the best of his ability to understand what we had done, was that we had developed high-level active listening skills in the kids.
Okay.
Turns out that active listening is one of the keys to being a good reader. And so our kids developed reading skills 1, 2, and 3 grade levels above their grade level. And of course, once a child starts reading well, then there's no stopping.
Everything else just keeps going.
Yeah, it keeps going. And so based on that, AJ, and this is what was really extraordinary for me, was I started creating education programs for orchestras that I conducted based on the active listening model. So we would, instead of playing a piece and saying, oh, this is a piece in minor key, how sad is it, or happy,
Right.
I would say, what do you hear? Is it a high pitch, middle pitch, low pitch? Is it loud, is it soft, is it fast, is it slow? What is the composer doing? Is the composer using the same idea or changing the idea? What's going on in the energy of the piece? You know, very specific ways of listening. And truthfully, that ability, not my conducting ability, but that education ability is what got me my first real job as a conductor, where I got paid. And that was as assistant conductor of the Louisville Orchestra. And I was about 29 years old when I won that job.
That's young for that, right?
It was young for it, and it was a big job, and I knew very little about
How big is that orchestra? Because Louisville's not like it's not a podunk town.
Yeah, it's a full-time orchestra,
right.
And they have a good-sized season. So it was it was a good job.
Yeah.
It was a good job. And it really launched a lot of things for me.
It's funny that you talk about active listening because I've had this conversation sort of on the side here and there. Coming up through music, like I started as a punk rock drummer. Like to tell you how different our musical journeys are. I started as a punk rock drummer, and to me, music was mostly noise, like mostly message on a noise.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the noise to me was never all like the way you and George love music. I never had that.
Yeah.
Right. Until like 3 or 4 years ago when I became the front man of a band and I started learning to really play guitar rather than just pounding on drums. Right.
Right.
And over that journey, I noticed I noticed my ability to hear things were different.
Yeah.
Like just there's a tone that I didn't know existed.
Yeah.
Like how could I even just find that? So your research found that through the way that you listen and the way you train your ear, basically.
Yep. We could help mind map with these kids. And so it really developed their active listening. And active listening is key to so many things. It's key to being appreciative of classical music, first of all, or any kind of music, right? You have to be able to listen to what you're hearing, not just experience it and let it wash over you like the great unwashed, but actually engage with it. In order to engage with music, you have to be able to understand what you're hearing and how to hear it, right?
Was the study that you were specifically involved with then developed or combined with other studies to?
There was a book that was written about the process called The Well-Tempered Mind. It was written by Peter Perret and Janet Fox. Peter was the music director of the Winston-Salem Symphony, whose brainchild this was to start. I was just brought in to execute. It was his brainchild. what I would say is myself and members of the original quintet, did a lot of training around the country of other musicians in other places that wanted to develop this program. And I would say probably most importantly, my work with orchestras, I do concerts for about 60 or 70,000 kids a year now, and I've been doing that for about 20 years. Mm-hmm. And all of that work is based on the model that I developed with the Bolton Project.
That'll do it for this episode of the AVB Podcast. Don't forget you can subscribe to our full audio episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere you find your audio podcasts. The full episodes, highlights, and our live off-the-floor performance videos can be found at our YouTube channel, and you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at the AVB Podcast. Of course, you'll find links to our incredible sponsors and this week's guest in the description below. The AVB Podcast is part of the Border City Network. Find more great content at bordercitynetwork.com. See you next time, folks. Bye-bye.